My daughter threw my house keys on the counter like she owned the place and announced that her new husband expected breakfast ready at 5 in the morning. 24 hours later, I was grinding laxatives into his eggs Benedict. But that was just the appetizer. The main course I had planned would give them a wake-up call they'd never forget. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button because what happened next changed everything. My name is Grace Hartwell, and at 52 years old, I thought I'd finally found peace. It was a Tuesday morning in late August, the kind of morning that makes you forget California has problems. Golden sunlight spilled across my deck as I sat with my coffee watching the waves roll in like they'd been doing for millions of years before me and would continue doing long after I was gone. My beach house wasn't the biggest in Malibu, not by a long shot, but it had a view that made real estate agents weep with envy and a silence that had taken me 5 years to appreciate. 5 years since the divorce. 5 years since I'd walked away from a 23-year marriage to a man who thought his secretary's youth was worth more than my loyalty. I didn't fight for the vacation homes or the stock portfolio. I just wanted this house. This quiet sanctuary where I could rebuild myself one sunrise at a time. The wall behind me still had a faded rectangle where our wedding photo used to hang. I'd never bothered to fill it. Some empty spaces tell their own story. My yoga mat was still rolled out from this morning's practice. Paintbrushes soaked in a coffee mug from yesterday's attempt at watercolors. A romance novel lay face down on the couch, its spine cracked at the good part. This was my life now. Messy, quiet, mine. I picked up my phone and dialed Richard Brennan. We'd been friends since my days as a corporate lawyer back when I still wore power suits and made men twice my age nervous in boardrooms. Grace, how's my favorite retired shark doing? I smiled at the nickname. Retired sharks still have teeth, Richard. I just choose not to bite anymore. What can I do for you? That investment opportunity you mentioned last week. The one promising 15% returns. I did some digging. And anyone promising 15% in this market is either lying or about to start lying. I'll pass. Richard laughed. This is why I miss having you in the office. Nobody else catches these things. 25 years of reading contracts teaches you to smell fraud from a mile away. We chatted for a few more minutes about nothing important. The weather, his daughter's college applications, the new restaurant in Santa Monica that was impossible to get into. Normal things. Safe things. I had no idea that in less than an hour, my carefully constructed piece was about to shatter into a million pieces. The sound came first. Tires on gravel too fast for a casual visitor. A car door slamming hard enough to wake the dead. Through my glass doors, I saw a black SUV in my driveway. Rental plates, and walking up my wooden steps dragging 3 massive suitcases was my 28-year-old daughter, Megan, with a man I'd never seen before. Mom! Megan didn't knock. She never knocked. She used the spare key I'd given her for emergencies and pushed through my front door like she was returning to a hotel room she'd already paid for. We're here. Here for what I hadn't invited anyone. The last time we'd spoken was 3 weeks ago when she'd hung up on me for suggesting that marrying someone she'd known for 6 months might be a bit hasty. I walked in from the deck, coffee still in hand, and got my first good look at the man trailing behind my daughter like a well-dressed shadow. Tall, dark hair with just enough gray at the temples to suggest maturity without age. A smile that probably worked wonders on women who didn't know any better. Megan, I said, keeping my voice neutral. What a surprise. She was already dragging luggage toward the guest staircase. Mom, this is Nathan. Nathan Cole, my husband. She said it with that emphasis people use when they want to make sure you understand they've made a life-changing decision without consulting you. We got married last week in Vegas. I let that sink in for a moment. My daughter, married, to a stranger, in Vegas. Nathan stepped forward with what I had to admit was a charming smile and extended his hand. Mrs. Hartwell, it's wonderful to finally meet you. Megan talks about this place constantly. Does she? I shook his hand, noting several things in rapid succession. The Rolex on his wrist, real or fake, hard to tell at a glance. The custom-tailored shirt, expensive taste. The shoes, good quality but slightly worn. Didn't quite match the rest of the picture. And his eyes. The way they moved around my living room wasn't admiration. It was appraisal. Like he was calculating the value of everything he saw. And what brings you both to my little sanctuary? I asked. Unannounced. We're on our honeymoon, Megan announced, as if that explained everything. We wanted somewhere peaceful and private. Plus, hotels are so impersonal, don't you think? I looked around my living room, my yoga mat, my paintbrushes, my novel face down at the good part. How long were you thinking of staying? Just a few days, Nathan said quickly. Too quickly. He shot a look at Megan that I didn't miss. Maybe a week, Megan corrected. We haven't really decided. That's the beauty of being spontaneous, right, Mom? You always said life was about embracing the unexpected. I had said that when she was 16 and afraid to try out for the school play. I hadn't meant it as permission to treat my home like a free hotel 28 years later. Of course, I said, because what else could I say with them standing in my living room with their luggage? Let me show you to the guest room. As I led them upstairs, I caught Nathan looking around with that same appraising expression. My beach house was modest by Malibu standards, but still worth more than most people would see in a lifetime. This is beautiful, Mrs. Hartwell, Nathan said. You have incredible taste. The natural light alone must add significant value to the property. Significant value to the property. Who talks like that about someone's home? I wasn't expecting company, I said, opening the guest room door and noting the boxes of Christmas decorations I'd been storing on the bed. Give me a few minutes to make it habitable. Don't go to any trouble, Mom. Megan was already bouncing on the mattress to test it. We're just happy to be here. Happy. Right. That afternoon, while they went for a walk on the beach, I prepared the room properly and tried to figure out why this visit felt different from Megan's usual dramatic entrances into my life. Maybe it was the way Nathan had looked at the house. Maybe it was the fact that she'd gotten married without telling me. Or maybe it was something I couldn't quite name yet. A feeling in my gut that had served me well during 25 years of corporate law. The feeling that something was very, very wrong. By dinner time, I had my answer. Nathan excused himself to take a phone call, and I noticed he walked all the way out to the deck, closing the glass door behind him. Through the glass, I could see him speaking rapidly, his charming smile completely gone. Megan helped herself to a glass of my good wine without asking. Mom, I need to talk to you about something. She settled onto my couch like she owned it. Something cold began to spread through my chest. I'm listening. Nathan and I were not just here for a romantic getaway. She paused dramatically, swirling her wine. We're here because we think it might be time for you to consider your living situation. I set down my coffee cup very carefully. My living situation. You're all alone out here, Mom. What if something happened? What if you fell, had an emergency? She took another sip, not meeting my eyes. Nathan thinks, and I agree, that it might be safer for you to move somewhere more manageable, closer to town. Maybe a nice condo. I stared at my daughter, this woman I'd given birth to, nursed through chickenpox and broken hearts and a rebellious phase that lasted most of her 20s. This woman who was now sitting in my living room, suggesting I was too old to live in my own home. And you thought you'd just show up here and convince me to sell my house. Not sell exactly. Megan finally looked at me, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt, or just the reflection of the wine in her glass. Nathan has experience in real estate investment. He thinks this property could be much better utilized if it was, properly managed. The pieces clicked into place. The unexpected visit, the new husband with expensive taste, the suggestion that I needed help managing my own life. How thoughtful of Nathan to take such an interest in my welfare. Mom, don't be like that. We're trying to help you. Help me what exactly? Make some smart financial decisions. Her voice took on a practiced quality, like she was reciting lines she'd rehearsed. You could live very comfortably on the proceeds from this place. And Nathan could handle all the investment details. It would be like having your own personal financial advisor. For 28 years, I'd watched my daughter's gift for rationalization, but this was impressive even for her. She'd married a stranger and was now sitting in my living room suggesting I hand over my home to him for proper management. Nathan chose that moment to return from his phone call, his charming smile back in place. Sorry about that. Business never stops, you know how it is. Actually, I don't, I said pleasantly. What business are you in, Nathan? Property development, investment consulting. He sat down next to Megan, his hand finding her knee in a gesture of casual ownership. I help people maximize their real estate potential. How convenient. The three of us sat there for a moment, the tension thick enough to spread on toast. Nathan seemed to sense that his new wife's subtle approach wasn't working. He leaned forward with the kind of sincerity that probably worked wonders in boardrooms and bedrooms alike. "Mrs. Hartwell, I hope you don't think we're being presumptuous. Megan just worries about you." And when she told me about this beautiful property sitting here underutilized, well, for one person it seems like a lot of house. I looked around my living room, the floor-to-ceiling windows facing the ocean, the fireplace I'd spent countless evenings reading beside, the kitchen where I'd taught myself to cook for one and discovered I actually enjoyed it. "You're right," I said finally. "It is a lot of house for one person." Nathan's smile widened. "That's what makes it perfect." His smile faltered. I stood up, gathering our empty cups. "I'm tired. It's been an eventful day. We can continue this conversation tomorrow." But as I washed dishes and listened to them whispering in the living room, I wasn't thinking about tomorrow's conversation. I was thinking about the way Nathan had mentioned this property to Megan before ever visiting it. I was thinking about his expertise in helping people with their real estate. And I was thinking about a name he'd casually dropped during dinner: Dorothy Walsh. "You know, Mrs. Hartwell, you're not the first person I've helped with this kind of transition. There was a lovely woman in Riverside, Dorothy Walsh. She was struggling with a property too big for her needs, and I helped her find the perfect solution." Something about the way he said it made me want to remember that name. So I did. The next morning started with a demand I never saw coming. I was making scrambled eggs for 3 when my daughter dropped the bomb that would change everything. "Mom, I need to talk to you about expectations." Megan didn't look up from her phone while I stood at the stove like hired help. What kind of expectations? Nathan was seated at my kitchen counter reading financial news on his tablet and occasionally making little humming sounds at whatever he was discovering about market trends. He'd been doing that since yesterday, treating my home like his personal office space. "Well, since we're staying here, I think it's important to establish some ground rules." Megan finally looked up, and I saw that expression I remembered from her teenage years, the one that always preceded something I wouldn't like. "Ground rules," I repeated, flipping eggs that were starting to smell better than this conversation. "Nathan has very specific requirements for his morning routine. He's an early riser, likes to get his day started right. Quality nutrition, quiet environment for his morning calls with the East Coast." I glanced at Nathan, who was nodding along like his wife was discussing something perfectly reasonable. "That sounds like Nathan's problem to solve." "Actually, Mom, I was hoping you could help with that." Her voice took on that wheedling tone that used to work when she was 7 and wanted an extra bedtime story. "Since you're always up early anyway, and you love to cook." "I love to cook for myself. On my schedule." Nathan looked up from his tablet with a smile that probably cost thousands in dental work. "Mrs. Hartwell, what Megan is trying to say is that we'd be incredibly grateful for any assistance you could provide, as the host." Host. As if I'd invited them to disrupt my peaceful existence and then start making demands about breakfast service. "I see." I turned back to my eggs before I said something I'd regret. "It doesn't have to be anything elaborate," Megan continued, apparently taking my silence as agreement. "Just something ready by 5 a.m. Nathan likes his coffee strong, no sugar, and maybe some eggs Benedict or fresh fruit. Nothing too complicated. 5 a.m. She wanted me to get up at 4 in the morning to prepare eggs Benedict for a husband she'd known for 6 months. A husband who had the audacity to suggest my home was underutilized. "Eggs Benedict," I said slowly, "or whatever you think is appropriate." Megan smiled brightly. "You're so good at this domestic stuff, Mom. It's really one of your strengths." One of my strengths. Like domestic service was a talent I should be proud to share rather than a set of skills I'd developed to take care of my own home and my own life. I served their breakfast and watched Nathan cut into his eggs with the precision of someone who'd never had to cook for himself. He'd probably spent his entire adult life with women eager to prove their worth by anticipating his needs. "This is delicious, Mrs. Hartwell. You're quite the chef." "Thank you. It's really perfect training for when you move into a smaller place," Megan added, apparently unable to let the real estate conversation go. "You'll have so much more time for cooking when you don't have all this space to maintain." After breakfast, they announced they were driving into town to explore and would be back for dinner. They said it like I'd be waiting here ready to prepare their evening meal. But as I watched their rental car disappear down my driveway, I wasn't thinking about dinner preparations. I was thinking about something I'd seen while Nathan was in the bathroom. His phone had been left on the kitchen counter. The screen had lit up with a notification, and for just a moment before the screen went dark again, I'd seen the words, Target Hartwell, Phase 2 initiated target. Not client, not contact. Target. The cold feeling in my chest from last night came back stronger this time. I had two choices. I could confront them when they returned. Demand answers. Create a scene that would end with them storming out and me never knowing what they'd really been planning. Or I could play along. Pretend to be the helpless middle-aged woman they clearly thought I was. And find out exactly what Nathan Cole was really after. 25 years of corporate law had taught me many things. The most important one, never let your enemy know you're onto them until you're ready to strike. They left for town at 10. By 10:15, I was on my laptop, my legal training kicking in like muscle memory. The first search was simple, Nathan Cole Property Development. The results were interesting. 3 LLCs registered to Nathan Cole in California. 2 had been dissolved in the past year. The third, Cole Holdings LLC, had exactly one project listed, a small apartment building in Riverside, currently in foreclosure proceedings. I leaned back in my chair, my coffee growing cold beside me. A property developer whose only property was being foreclosed on. Yet he wore a Rolex and custom-tailored shirts and spoke about real estate investment like he actually knew what he was doing. The second search made my blood run cold. Dorothy Walsh, Riverside, California. I found the article on page 2 of the results. A small piece in the Riverside Press Enterprise from 8 months ago. Elderly widow loses home in alleged investment scheme. Dorothy Walsh, 71, claims she was pressured into signing over property management rights to an investment company that promised monthly returns. After 3 months, the payment stopped. Now her family home of 40 years faces foreclosure. The company named in the lawsuit Cole Holdings LLC. My hands were shaking as I picked up my phone. Richard, I need a favor. Grace, you sound strange. What's wrong? I need you to run a deep background check on a company called Cole Holdings LLC and a man named Nathan Cole. What's going on? I'm not sure yet, but I think my daughter may have married a con artist. Richard was quiet for a moment. We'd known each other long enough that he didn't need more explanation. Give me 24 hours. I'll call in some favors. After hanging up, I did one more search, the one I'd been avoiding. Nathan Cole Marriage Records, California. And there it was. Nathan Cole had been married before, to a woman named Rebecca Stone of San Diego. Divorced 2 years ago, the same year Dorothy Walsh's nightmare began. I found Rebecca Stone's name attached to a business Stone's catering a successful restaurant and event company in San Diego. Had been successful. The business had been sold suddenly right around the time of her divorce. Sold for a fraction of its market value according to the business records I could access. I picked up my phone again and dialed the number I'd found for Rebecca Stone. Hello? The voice on the other end was cautious, guarded. Mrs. Stone, my name is Grace Hartwell. I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to ask you about your ex-husband. Silence. Then, Nathan sent you. If this is some kind of... Nathan didn't send me. My daughter just married him, and I think he's trying to steal my house. More silence, then a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. Join the club, Mrs. Hartwell. Sit down. This is going to take a while. For the next 40 minutes, Rebecca Stone told me everything. How Nathan had swept her off her feet after her first husband died. How he'd convinced her to put her catering business up as collateral for what he called a sure thing real estate investment. How the investment had failed because it was designed to fail and she'd lost everything. He's not working alone, Rebecca said, her voice heavy with old anger. There's someone else. I used to hear him on the phone speaking Spanish to someone he called Handler. They have a whole system, Mrs. Hartwell. They research their targets. They know everything about you before they even make first contact. Targets, I repeated, remembering the text message on Nathan's phone. That's what you are to them, not people. Assets to be acquired. Rebecca paused. Mrs. Hartwell, be very careful. Nathan isn't just a con artist. He's dangerous. When I started asking questions, things happened. My car was vandalized. Someone broke into my apartment. I got the message and stopped talking to the police. I thanked Rebecca and hung up, my mind racing. Nathan Cole wasn't just a small-time scammer. He was part of something bigger, an organized operation that targeted women like me, women with valuable property, women who lived alone, women who society assumed were helpless. I looked out at the ocean, watching the waves that had been my comfort for 5 years. They thought I was prey. They were about to learn that this prey had teeth, 4 o'clock in the morning. My alarm went off in the darkness, and I smiled. It had been 3 days since Nathan and Megan arrived. 3 days of watching Nathan charm his way through my home, dropping hints about property values and investment opportunities. 3 days of Megan treating me like staff, asking for meals and laundry, and, "Mom, could you just—" Yesterday, I'd confirmed what I suspected. While Nathan was taking a business call on the deck, I'd done something I hadn't done since my years as a corporate lawyer investigating fraud. I'd searched his luggage. What I found had kept me awake most of the night. A second phone hidden in the lining of his suitcase. The messages on it were damning. Phase 2 initiated. Target receptive. Asset assessment complete. Property value 3.4 NS. Handler confirms documentation ready for Phase 3. And there was more. A file folder carefully hidden in a false bottom of his briefcase. Inside, a complete dossier on me. Photos of my house taken 6 months ago before he'd ever met Megan. A detailed breakdown of my assets, including things I'd never told anyone. My divorce settlement. My investment accounts. Even my medical records. And at the bottom, a page titled Psychological Profile. Subject Grace Hartwell 52. Divorced, limited family contact. Shows signs of isolation and need for connection. Vulnerability assessment. High. Approach through daughter, see file Megan Hartwell. Access point. Access point. My own daughter had been used as a key to unlock me. I'd taken photos of everything and put it all back exactly as I'd found it. Then I'd called Richard. "The background check came through," he said. "Grace, you're dealing with professionals. Cole Holdings is connected to at least 12 cases of elder fraud across 5 states. They target women with high-value real estate, usually widows or divorcees living alone. Nathan Cole is their closer, the one who seals the deal. What about the police?" "That's the problem. Most victims are too embarrassed to testify, or the evidence disappears before prosecution. These people know what they're doing." "Then I'll give them evidence they can't make disappear." "What are you planning?" "First, I'm going to give Nathan exactly what he asked for." Which brings me back to 4 o'clock in the morning, standing in my dark kitchen with a very special breakfast in mind. I moved through the familiar space by memory, gathering my ingredients. Fresh eggs, good butter, English muffins, and a bottle of herbal supplements I'd picked up yesterday at the organic market. Senna leaf extract. Completely natural, completely legal, and absolutely devastating to anyone who consumed more than the recommended dose. Nathan wanted breakfast at 5 a.m. I was going to give him a meal he'd never forget. The coffee came first. Ground fresh, just the way he liked it. Strong, no sugar, and approximately 4 times the recommended dose of senna extract dissolved into the pot. The eggs Benedict were a work of art. Perfect poached eggs, crispy Canadian bacon, English muffins, toasted golden brown. And hollandaise sauce infused with enough natural laxative to keep a horse occupied for a week. Megan's breakfast was completely normal. Scrambled eggs and toast. She hadn't made demands about 5 a.m. service, so she got exactly what she'd always gotten from me, the minimum effort required to avoid being accused of being an unloving mother. At exactly 4:47 a.m. I heard movement upstairs. Nathan's internal clock was apparently as precise as his demands. I arranged his breakfast beautifully on my best china and waited. "Mrs. Hartwell." Nathan appeared in the kitchen wearing an expensive silk robe and looking genuinely surprised to see everything ready. "You actually did this." "You said 5 a.m. I smiled warmly. "I aim to please." He sat down at the counter and I poured his specially prepared coffee into my finest cup. "This smells fantastic. You really didn't have to go to all this trouble." "No trouble at all." I watched him take his first sip. "I believe in giving people exactly what they ask for." Nathan ate with the enthusiasm of someone who'd grown accustomed to having his needs met without question. He complimented the eggs, praised the coffee, and told me how much he appreciated having someone who understood the importance of routine. "You're quite the hostess," he said, finishing his last bite of hollandaise-covered eggs. "Megan was right. You really do have a gift for this." "I have many gifts," I replied, refilling his coffee. "Some of them take longer to reveal themselves than others." 45 minutes later, the first signs appeared. A slight furrow in Nathan's brow, a hand pressed against his stomach, a quick glance toward the hallway bathroom. "Excuse me," he said, standing abruptly. "I need to—" He didn't finish the sentence. He was moving too fast. The bathroom door slammed. Locked. and Nathan Cole began a journey that would keep him occupied for the next several hours. Megan came downstairs an hour later looking confused to find her husband still absent. "Where's Nathan? Bathroom," I said, sipping my tea. "I think something didn't agree with him. But he has calls this morning, important meetings." Right on cue, a sound from the bathroom suggested Nathan wouldn't be taking any calls for quite a while. "Food poisoning can be very sudden," I said sympathetically. "Maybe something he ate at that restaurant yesterday. But I ate the same things he did, and I feel fine." "Everyone reacts differently to bacteria, dear." 3 hours later, they were loading Nathan into their rental car, heading for the urgent care clinic. He could barely walk, which meant he wouldn't notice that his second phone was now missing from his suitcase, or that I'd made copies of every document in his hidden file, or that while he was suffering the consequences of his breakfast choices, I'd been on the phone with an old colleague at the FBI. Phase 2 of Nathan's plan had just been interrupted, but Phase 1 of mine was right on schedule. The house was finally quiet. Nathan and Megan had been gone for 3 hours. The urgent care clinic, according to Megan's frustrated texts, was packed with summer tourists suffering from various ailments. They'd be a while. I sat at my kitchen table with Nathan's second phone, the one he thought was safely hidden. The passcode was his birthday. I'd found it in his file on me. Apparently he kept notes on himself too. Careless. But then he'd probably never expected his target to search his belongings. The messages told the whole story. A conversation thread with someone labeled only as HH, target acquired N in progress. Daughter is cooperating perfectly. H timeline N, property transfer documents ready for Friday. Need notary. H Carlos will handle. Same arrangement as Patterson job. H, don't get comfortable. Remember what happened with the stone woman. N, this one's different. She's lonely. Desperate for family connection. Easy. Easy. He thought I was easy. I scrolled further back, finding references to other names. Other jobs. Dorothy Walsh. Asset value 1.2 M. Status completed. Margaret Chen. Asset value 890K. Status completed. Francis Miller. Asset value 2.1 M. Status completed. 12 names in total. 12 women who'd lost their homes, their savings, their security. The file I'd photographed from his briefcase contained even more. A training document titled Elder Asset Acquisition Best Practices. Identify targets through public property records and social media. Build psychological profiles based on visible vulnerabilities. Establish trust through family connections when possible. Use romantic relationships for single targets. Family pressure for others. Timeline 3 to 6 months from first contact to asset transfer. If target becomes problematic, refer to elimination protocols. Elimination protocols. I found that document too. 3 options for targets who ask too many questions or threaten to go to the police. Option 1, discredit. Spread rumors about mental decline unreliability. Option 2, intimidate. Property damage, accidents, implied threats. Option 3, remove. Reserved for high-value targets with no family protection. My hands were steady as I photographed every page. 25 years of corporate law had prepared me for many things. Reading documents that revealed the depths of human cruelty was unfortunately one of them. But there was something else in that suitcase. Something that changed everything. A second file folder. This one labeled Megan Hartwell. Inside was a dossier as complete as my own. Photos of Megan at her job, at her apartment, at the coffee shop she visited every Saturday morning. Her psychological profile seeks external validation. History of relationships with older, controlling men, easily influenced by attention and perceived status. Father issues following parents' divorce. And at the bottom, a note in Nathan's handwriting. First contact make appear accidental. Location Saturday coffee shop. Approach admiration, attention, listening. Timeline to relationship 6 to 8 weeks. Timeline to marriage 4 to 6 months. Purpose access. Point to primary target. My daughter hadn't fallen in love. She'd been hunted. Nathan had researched her for months before their chance meeting. He'd engineered every moment of their relationship. He'd studied her psychology, identified her vulnerabilities, and exploited them with surgical precision. The man she thought loved her saw her as nothing more than a key to unlock my door. I sat with that knowledge for a long time, staring at the files spread across my kitchen table. Part of me wanted to call Megan immediately, show her the evidence, watch her realize who she'd really married. But I knew my daughter. She would deny it, get defensive, accuse me of fabricating evidence because I'd never liked Nathan. She wasn't ready to see the truth. Not yet, but she would be. I put everything back in Nathan's suitcase exactly as I'd found it, minus the second phone. Then I called Richard. I need you to connect me with your contact at the FBI. I have evidence of a multi-state fraud operation targeting elderly women. Grace, these are dangerous people. Are you sure you want to? Richard, they have a file on my daughter. They've been stalking her for 18 months. They used her to get to me. My voice was steady. I'm sure. Okay, there's an agent named Sarah Harrison, Financial Crimes Task Force. She's been trying to build a case against this network for 2 years, but the victims are too scared or embarrassed to cooperate. I'm not scared, and I'm definitely not embarrassed. I know. That's what worries me. They came back at sunset, Nathan looking like he'd aged 10 years. The doctor said it was food poisoning, Megan announced, helping her husband to the couch. He needs to rest and stay hydrated. How terrible, I said, the picture of maternal concern. Can I get you anything, Nathan? Some broth, ginger ale? He looked at me with something I hadn't seen before. Suspicion. But he was too weak to act on it, and I was too good at appearing harmless. Water would be fine. Thank you, Mrs. Hartwell. Of course. You just rest. We can continue our conversation about my living situation when you're feeling better. Something flickered in his eyes. I'm looking forward to that, he said carefully. I bet you are. The next morning, while Nathan slept and Megan went for a run on the beach, I drove to Santa Monica for a meeting that would change everything. Agent Sarah Harrison was younger than I expected. Mid-40s, sharp eyes that missed nothing, a handshake that meant business. Her partner, Agent Lisa Sullivan, was softer around the edges, but no less intense, a specialist in criminal psychology, according to Richard. We met in a coffee shop far from Malibu, in a corner booth where we could speak without being overheard. Mrs. Hartwell, we've been investigating the Heartbreak Network for 2 years, Agent Harrison said, her voice low. We know Nathan Cole is one of their primary closers, but every time we get close to an arrest, the evidence disappears or the victims stop cooperating. They're terrified, Agent Sullivan added. These people know how to intimidate, and frankly, many of our victims are embarrassed. They don't want to admit they were fooled. I'm not embarrassed, I said. I'm angry. I slid a USB drive across the table. This contains photos of every document in Nathan Cole's possession, including training materials, target lists, and communication with his handler. Agent Harrison's eyes widened. How did you? I was a corporate lawyer for 25 years. I know how to build a case. I paused. I also know that you need a victim who's willing to testify, someone who can make a jury understand how these people operate. And you're offering to be that victim. I'm offering to be bait. Both agents were silent. Nathan thinks I'm an easy target, a lonely middle-aged woman desperate for family connection. I allowed myself a small smile. I'd like to let him continue thinking that. Let him present his documents. Let him incriminate himself on camera, and then take down his entire operation. Agent Sullivan leaned forward. Mrs. Hartwell, what you're suggesting is dangerous. These people have protocols for targets who cause problems. I know. I read their elimination protocols. Option 3 sounds particularly unpleasant. And that doesn't concern you. I looked at both agents for a long moment. When I was 30, I prosecuted a fraud case that saved 1,200 jobs. When I was 40, I brought down a company that was poisoning a town's water supply. I've spent my life fighting people who think they can get away with anything because their victims are too scared or too weak to fight back. I finished my coffee and set down the cup. Nathan Cole picked the wrong target, and I'm going to make sure he regrets it for the rest of his life. We spent the next hour planning. The FBI would install recording equipment in my home, cameras and microphones in every room Nathan might use for his business conversations. I would continue playing the vulnerable widow, letting Nathan move toward his goal. He'd mentioned needing me to sign some documents by Friday, almost certainly the property transfer papers that would begin the process of stealing my home. When he presented those documents, the FBI would have enough evidence to arrest him and trace the entire network. There's one more thing, I said as we prepared to leave. My daughter, Megan. She's not involved in this operation. She's a victim too. Nathan targeted her specifically to get access to me. Agent Sullivan nodded sympathetically. We've seen this pattern before. The access point rarely knows what's really happening. When this is over, I want her protected. She's going to need help understanding what was done to her. We can arrange counseling, support resources. I stood gathering my purse. Good, because when Nathan Cole goes to prison, my daughter is going to need someone to help her pick up the pieces. And what about you, Mrs. Hartwell? Agent Harrison asked. Who's going to help you? I thought about the waves outside my window, the sunrise I'd watched this morning, the life I'd built from the wreckage of my marriage. 3 days later, I sat in my living room and told Nathan Cole exactly what he wanted to hear. I've been thinking about your proposal. His eyes lit up. The charming smile appeared instantly. That's wonderful news, Mrs. Hartwell. I knew you'd see the logic in it. Yes, the logic is quite clear. I watched him straighten in his chair, barely able to contain his excitement. After 4 days of food poisoning recovery and my apparent cooperation, he thought he was finally closing the deal. He had no idea that 3 FBI agents were listening from a van parked 2 streets away. Nathan, you mentioned you have experience helping people with property transitions. I'd love to hear more about how the process works. Of course. He pulled out a leather folder I recognized from his briefcase. First, we'll do a comprehensive assessment of your property's value. Then we'll look at your current financial situation, debts, expenses, that sort of thing. After that, I can present you with several options for maximizing your return. And you'd handle the sale directly? Through my company, yes. It's much more efficient than traditional real estate agents who don't understand the unique needs of senior property owners. Senior property owners. I was 52, but to Nathan, any woman alone was elderly, vulnerable, easy. What about the paperwork? I'm afraid I'm not very good with legal documents. Nathan's smile widened. You don't have to worry about any of that. I'll prepare everything and my notary will come to the house on Friday to witness your signature. Very simple. Very painless. Your notary? A colleague. Very professional. He handles all my client closings. His colleague. The man he'd called Carlos in his messages. The one who'd helped him steal Dorothy Walsh's home. That sounds wonderful, I said. But I would like to have my own lawyer review the documents first, and perhaps my financial advisor. You understand a decision this significant requires proper oversight. Something flickered in Nathan's eyes, the first hint of concern. Of course, though I should mention that these opportunities are time-sensitive. The market conditions that make this such an attractive option won't last forever. I understand, but I'm sure a few days won't make a difference. I stood signaling the end of our conversation. Nathan, I want you to know how much I appreciate your concern for my welfare. It's nice to have someone looking out for me. He stood too, his smile back in place, but not quite reaching his eyes. That's what family is for Mrs. Hartwell. Family. The word sounded obscene coming from him. That night after Nathan and Megan had gone to bed, I sat on my deck and looked at the stars. Everything was in place. The FBI had their recording equipment. The documents Nathan would present Friday would be evidence of fraud. When he put those papers in front of me, expecting me to sign away my home, he'd be signing away his freedom instead. But there was one piece still missing. Megan. My daughter still believed she was married to a successful businessman. Still believed Nathan loved her. Still believed her mother was an obstacle to her happiness rather than Nathan's target. Friday would shatter everything she thought she knew. I had 2 days to decide how to handle that. Part of me wanted to protect her, keep her away from the takedown, let the FBI explain it to her afterward. But another part, the part that had been a mother for 28 years, knew that wouldn't work. Megan needed to see the truth with her own eyes. She needed to hear Nathan incriminate himself. She needed to understand in a way that couldn't be denied or rationalized away exactly what kind of man she'd married. It would break her heart. But hearts heal, and the truth, however painful, was better than a lifetime built on lies. I picked up my phone and sent a text to Agent Harrison. Friday. We do this Friday, and my daughter needs to be there. The response came immediately. Understood. We'll be ready. I put down my phone and looked back at the ocean. 2 more days of pretending. 2 more days of smiling at Nathan and making his breakfast and acting like the helpless widow he thought I was. Then the trap would spring, and Nathan Cole would learn what happened when you picked a target who knew how to fight back. End of part 1. What would you do if someone tried to steal everything you'd worked for? Have you ever had to protect yourself from someone who pretended to care about you? Comment below and tell me I read every single one. Part 2 is coming where the trap finally springs, and Nathan Cole gets exactly what he deserves. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. And if this story resonated with you, check out 2 other favorites from this channel. The links are in the description. Until next time, remember, never underestimate a woman who's learned to take care of herself. I know. Ironic, right? He stood in my kitchen at 6 a.m. wearing an apron I didn't know I owned, flipping pancakes like a man auditioning for a cooking show. The charming smile was back at full power, and if I didn't know what I knew, I might have actually believed he cared. Mrs. Hartwell, please, sit. After everything you've done for us, it's the least I can do. I sat at my own kitchen counter like a guest in my own home and watched him work. 2 more days. 2 more days of this performance before Friday's confrontation. 2 more days of smiling at the man who planned to steal everything I had. Nathan, this is very thoughtful. Megan told me you've seemed tired lately. He slid a plate of perfectly golden pancakes in front of me. I want you to know that we appreciate everything you're doing. This transition, I know it's not easy. Transition. Such a gentle word for theft. I've been thinking about what you said. I told him, cutting into a pancake I had no intention of eating. About the documents on Friday. His eyes sharpened with interest, though his smile never wavered. And I'd like to understand exactly what I'll be signing. Walk me through the process. For the next 30 minutes, Nathan laid out his entire scheme. He didn't call it a scheme, of course. He called it asset optimization, and strategic repositioning, and legacy planning. But underneath all the financial jargon, the plan was simple. Step 1, I would sign a power of attorney giving Cole Holdings LLC authority to manage my property. Step 2, Cole Holdings would assess my home's value conveniently lower than market rate. Step 3, the company would arrange a quick sale to avoid market fluctuations. Step 4, the proceeds would be invested in a portfolio that Nathan would manage. Step 5, I would receive monthly payments from this portfolio while living in a more appropriate setting. What Nathan didn't explain was Step 6. The payments would stop after a few months, the portfolio would somehow lose all its value, and I would find myself homeless with no legal recourse because I'd signed away my rights. Dorothy Walsh could have told me all about Step 6. It sounds very comprehensive, I said when he finished. I've done this many times, Mrs. Hartwell. My clients always end up better off than they started. I looked at his face, so confident, so charming, so completely convinced that I was buying every word. I'm sure they do, Nathan. I'm sure they do. Thursday evening, Nathan escalated. I was reading on the deck when he appeared with a leather portfolio and the expression of a man about to close a deal. Mrs. Hartwell, do you have a moment? I'd like to show you the preliminary documents for tomorrow. Preliminary documents. The appetizer before the main course of fraud. Of course. He sat across from me, spreading papers across the table like a Vegas dealer showing his cards. Except these cards were stacked entirely in his favor. This is the property management agreement. Standard language, very straightforward. I picked up the document, scanning it with eyes that had reviewed thousands of contracts over 25 years. Standard language, my foot. Buried in paragraph 7 was a clause that gave Cole Holdings full discretionary authority over any decisions regarding the property. Paragraph 12 contained a waiver of my right to legal counsel. Paragraph 19, hidden on page 8 in 6-point font, transferred actual ownership to the company upon completion of optimization process. It was beautifully done, actually. A masterpiece of legal manipulation designed to look helpful while stealing everything. This seems very thorough, I said, setting down the document. I believe in being comprehensive. Nathan leaned forward, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. Mrs. Hartwell, Grace. May I call you Grace? Of course. Grace, I want you to know that I think of you as family now. Everything I'm doing here is because I care about your well-being. I looked at this man, this predator in a designer suit, and marveled at his ability to say those words without choking on them. That means a lot to me, Nathan. Good, because tomorrow is going to be the beginning of a wonderful new chapter for all of us. He gathered his papers. Carlos will arrive at 10. The whole process should take less than an hour, and then you'll never have to worry about managing this property again. Never have to worry, because I wouldn't own it anymore. I'll be ready, I said. Nathan smiled, patted my hand like I was a child who'd finally agreed to take her medicine, and walked back into the house. I waited until he was gone, then pulled out my phone. Agent Harrison, he just showed me the documents. We have everything we need. Good. We'll be in position by 9 tomorrow morning. There's one more thing. I need you to delay the operation by 1 hour. Why? Because my daughter needs to see who her husband really is, and she's not scheduled to be back from her morning run until 10:30. A pause. Mrs. Hartwell, that's cutting it very close. I know, but Megan deserves to witness this herself. Otherwise, she'll never believe it. Another pause, longer this time. All right, we'll hold until you give the signal, but the moment things go sideways, you come in, I understand. I hung up and looked out at the ocean. One more night, one more sunrise. Then Nathan Cole would learn what happened when he targeted the wrong woman. That night, something unexpected happened. I was in the kitchen making tea when Megan appeared in the doorway. No makeup, hair pulled back. She looked younger than I'd seen her in years, and she looked scared. Mom, can we talk? I set down my cup. Of course, sweetheart. What's wrong? She sat at the counter fidgeting with her wedding ring, a ring I now knew Nathan had bought with money stolen from his previous victim. It's probably nothing. I'm probably being paranoid. Tell me anyway. Megan took a deep breath. Nathan has a second phone. I kept my face completely neutral. A second phone? I found it yesterday, hidden in his suitcase. I wasn't snooping, I was just looking for his charger, and... She trailed off, her eyes meeting mine. Mom, the messages on it were strange. Strange how? Business stuff, mostly. But the language was weird. Words like target and asset acquisition and phase 3, and there was a conversation with someone called Handler, like a spy movie or something. She laughed nervously, but her eyes weren't laughing. Did you ask Nathan about it? He said it was a work phone, confidential business communications. Megan twisted her ring again. He got really defensive, said I shouldn't have been going through his things. I reached across the counter and took her hand. Megan, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay? How did you and Nathan meet? She blinked, surprised by the question. At a coffee shop, the one I go to on Saturdays. He was there reading, and he struck up a conversation about the book I was holding. Had you ever seen him there before? No, that was the first. She stopped, frowned. Actually, now that I think about it, he knew exactly what I liked to order. I thought he'd just heard me tell the barista, but what? But I didn't order that day. I'd brought coffee from home. I only went to the shop because I'd forgotten my laptop charger. I watched the gears turning in her head, the first cracks appearing in the story she'd told herself. Megan, I need to show you something, but I need you to promise me you'll look at it with an open mind. Mom, you're scaring me. I know. I'm sorry, but this is important. I went to my bedroom and retrieved the folder I'd been keeping hidden, the copies I'd made of Nathan's documents, the photos of his files, the printouts of his messages, including the file labeled Megan Hartwell. What is this? Megan asked as I spread the papers across the counter. The truth about your husband. For the next hour, I walked her through everything. The dossier on me compiled months before they ever met. The psychological profiles, the vulnerability assessments, the list of previous victims. Dorothy Walsh, Rebecca Stone, Frances Miller, 12 women who'd lost everything, and finally the file on Megan herself. Access point, she read aloud, her voice hollow. Purpose access to primary target. She looked up at me and I saw the moment her world shattered. He never loved me. No, sweetheart, he didn't. The coffee shop, our first date, the proposal, all of it was planned, researched, executed according to a script. Megan stared at the papers spread across the counter. Her wedding photo was visible on the table, she and Nathan smiling in front of a Vegas chapel, both of them playing their assigned roles. I'm so stupid, she whispered. No. I came around the counter and took her hands. You're not stupid. These people are professionals. They've done this dozens of times. They study psychology, identify vulnerabilities, exploit human nature. You were a target, Megan, just like me. But I brought him here. I helped him. Her voice cracked. I told him about your house, your divorce, your investments. I gave him everything he needed to steal from you. Because you thought you were helping. Because he manipulated you into believing that. Tears were streaming down her face now. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I pulled her into my arms the way I had when she was 7 and the world was too big and too scary. It's not your fault, sweetheart. None of this is your fault. We stood there for a long time, mother and daughter surrounded by evidence of betrayal. Finally, Megan pulled back and wiped her eyes. What do we do now? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't seen in years. Strength. Now, I said, we make him pay. I told Megan everything. The FBI, Agent Harrison, the recording equipment hidden throughout the house, tomorrow's planned takedown. Her eyes went wide. You've been working with the FBI this whole time. Since the day after you arrived. But you acted like... You seemed so helpless, confused. That's what Nathan expected to see, so that's what I showed him. Megan stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Mom, who are you? I smiled. I'm a woman who spent 25 years fighting corporate criminals in courtrooms. Nathan Cole is an amateur compared to some of the people I've taken down. But you retired. You quit law. I quit practicing law. I didn't quit being able to think like a lawyer. I squeezed her hand. And I definitely didn't quit being able to protect my family. We spent the rest of the night planning. Megan's role was simple but crucial. Keep Nathan unsuspecting until the FBI moved in. Go for her morning run as usual. Return at her normal time. Act like everything was fine. I don't know if I can do this, she said. Look him in the face and pretend, you can. You've been doing it for 6 months without knowing. Now you're doing it on purpose. But what if he suspects something? What if I give it away? I thought about this. Nathan sees you as a tool, Megan, not a person. He's not looking at your face for signs of deception because he doesn't think you're capable of deceiving him. I held her gaze. Use that. Be exactly what he expects you to be, the naive wife who loves him without question. Something hardened in Megan's eyes. I can do that. I know you can. At 2 a.m, we finally went to bed. I didn't sleep. I lay in the darkness listening to the waves outside my window, thinking about tomorrow. Everything was in place. The FBI would be watching from the moment Carlos Nathan's fake notary arrived. Nathan would present his fraudulent documents explaining each one while the cameras recorded. I would pretend to read them, asking questions that forced him to incriminate himself further. And just before I signed, I would give the signal. Then the trap would spring. It was a good plan. A solid plan. But lying there in the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. Nathan had done this before, 12 times at least. He was careful, methodical, professional. Would he really walk into such an obvious trap? Or did he have a backup plan I hadn't anticipated? I finally drifted off around 4, my dreams full of documents and deceptions. The alarm woke me at 7. Friday had arrived. The sun rose over Malibu like any other day. Beautiful, indifferent, unaware that lives were about to change. I showered, dressed, and went downstairs to find Nathan already at the kitchen counter, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. Good morning, Grace. Today's the big day. Yes, it is. I've arranged for Carlos to arrive at 10. We should have everything wrapped up by 11. He smiled that charming smile. And then we can start planning your move to somewhere more comfortable. More comfortable than my own home. The home I'd built a new life in. The home this man was trying to steal. That sounds wonderful, I said evenly. Megan came downstairs in her running clothes, avoiding Nathan's eyes. I'm going for my run. Back in an hour or so. Take your time, babe. Nathan barely glanced at her. He was focused entirely on me now, on the deal he thought he was about to close. We've got everything under control here. Megan caught my eye for just a second. I nodded imperceptibly. Then she was gone, jogging down the beach path like any other morning. The next 3 hours were torture. Nathan reviewed the documents again, explaining clauses I already understood far better than he did. I asked my confused old woman questions, drawing out explanations that the FBI would use against him. So this paragraph here about full discretionary authority, what exactly does that mean? It simply means that my company can make decisions about the property without needing your signature every time. Very standard. Saves you the hassle of paperwork. Standard hassle, making theft sound like customer service. At 9:45, a car pulled into my driveway. That'll be Carlos, Nathan said, straightening his tie. Right on time. Carlos turned out to be a small man in a cheap suit carrying a leather briefcase that looked more expensive than anything else about him. His notary stamp was almost certainly fake. His credentials were almost certainly invented, but he played his part with professional ease. "Mrs. Hartwell, a pleasure. I understand you're making some exciting changes today." "So I'm told." They set up at my dining room table, documents spread out in precise rows, 2 pens placed at exact right angles, a performance of legitimacy that was impressive in its attention to detail. "Now," Nathan said, sitting across from me with Carlos at his side, "let's walk through each document one more time just so you're completely comfortable." Where was Megan? She should have been back by now. Her runs never took more than 45 minutes. I checked my phone while Nathan droned on about property values and investment returns. No messages, no missed calls. Something was wrong, but I couldn't stop now. The FBI was watching, recording, waiting for my signal. "Grace, did you hear what I said?" I looked up. Nathan was staring at me with that charming smile, but there was something different in his eyes now. Calculation. "I'm sorry, Nathan. Could you repeat that?" "I asked if you're ready to sign." The moment had arrived. I reached for the pen, and my phone buzzed. A text from Megan. "Mom, don't sign anything. Nathan knows. He found the FBI files on your laptop. Run." My blood turned to ice. Nathan was watching my face with that calculated smile. "Something wrong, Grace." I looked up at the man who had planned to steal my home, manipulated my daughter, and destroyed 12 other women's lives. He knew. He'd known all along. "Actually, yes," I said slowly. "Something is very wrong." Nathan's smile widened. "I know about the FBI, Grace. I've known since Tuesday." Here time seemed to stop. The gun was small and black and very real. Carlos had produced one too, holding it casually at his side like this was just another day at the office. "You really thought I wouldn't notice the recording equipment?" Nathan asked, his charming mask completely gone now. "Or the van parked 2 streets away? Or the sudden interest your lawyer friend has been taking in my business?" My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed steady. "So what happens now?" "Now we do this the fast way instead of the slow way." Nathan stood, keeping the gun pointed at me. "You're going to sign these documents, all of them, and then you're going to call your FBI friends and tell them it was a false alarm. And if I don't, then Carlos and I have a very unpleasant conversation with your daughter." He smiled. "We picked her up 20 minutes ago. She's waiting in the car, scared but unharmed." Megan. They had Megan. "You're bluffing." Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out Megan's phone. The screen showed a photo Megan in the back of a car, duct tape over her mouth, eyes wide with terror. "Not bluffing, Grace?" "Never bluffing." My hands were shaking now, for real. "Let her go. This is between us." "It was between us, but then you got the FBI involved. Then you started digging into my business. Then you became a problem that can't be solved with paperwork." He circled behind me, the gun never wavering. "Here's how this is going to work. You sign the documents, you call off the FBI, you sell this house to my company, and you disappear into a nice, quiet retirement home where no one will believe your crazy stories about fraud. And Megan? Megan stays with me, at least for a while, long enough to make sure you keep your mouth shut." His voice hardened. "Cross me, and she has an accident. A tragic accident that no one will be able to trace back to me." Carlos was at the window now, watching the street. "We need to move this along," he said. "The van is still there." "Then let's move it along." Nathan shoved a pen into my hand. "Sign Grace. Sign and your daughter lives." I looked at the documents spread across my table. The power of attorney that would give them control of my assets. The property transfer that would steal my home. The investment agreement that would drain everything I had. 25 years of fighting corporate criminals. 5 years of rebuilding my life. And it came down to this, my signature, or my daughter's life. I picked up the pen. "That's a good girl," Nathan said. "Smart to the end." I signed the first document, then the second. My hand was trembling. Real fear, real desperation. I reached for the third document, and the front door exploded inward. "FBI freeze, nobody move." Agent Harrison came through the door, first weapon drawn. Agent Sullivan right behind her. 4 more agents flooding through the back entrance. Nathan spun toward the commotion, his gun swinging away from me. For just a second, I grabbed the crystal vase from my table and brought it down on his head with every ounce of strength I had. He dropped like a stone. Carlos tried to run. Agent Sullivan tackled him before he got 3 steps. And just like that, it was over. Grace, are you all right? Agent Harrison was at my side, but I was already on my feet. Megan, they said they have Megan. We know. We've had her phone tracked since last night. Harrison spoke into her radio. Team 2 report. A crackle of static, then target vehicle located. Female hostage secured. 2 suspects in custody. I sagged against the table relief flooding through me. Safe. Megan was safe. On the floor, Nathan was groaning, blood streaming from the gash in his head where my grandmother's crystal had connected with his skull. You, he mumbled, looking up at me with unfocused eyes. You were supposed to be easy. I knelt down until my face was inches from his. I was never easy, Nathan. I was just patient. Then I stood up and walked away, leaving him bleeding on my floor, while the FBI read him his rights. The next few hours blurred together. Megan arrived shaking and crying and throwing herself into my arms. Mom. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. They grabbed me on the beach. I didn't see them until, shh, it's over. You're safe. FBI agents swarmed through my house, photographing evidence and bagging documents. Nathan and Carlos were loaded into separate vehicles, their hands cuffed behind their backs. Just before they put him in the car, Nathan looked back at me through the window. His charming mask was gone. What remained was something cold and empty and utterly without humanity. I held his gaze until the car pulled away. Agent Harrison found me on the deck an hour later staring at the ocean while Megan slept inside, sedated by paramedics. Mrs. Hartwell, we recovered the hard drive from Nathan's vehicle. Hard drive, hidden in the spare tire compartment. It contains operational data for the entire network. Target lists, financial records, communication logs with overseas accounts. She paused. And something else. What? A document called Elimination Protocols, with your name on the active list. I turned to face her. Active list. Nathan's handlers had already approved moving you to Protocol 3. If today's signing hadn't worked, they were authorized to... She hesitated. Kill me. Yes. I looked back at the ocean. The same waves I'd watched for 5 years. The same sunset I'd seen 1,000 times. And I'd never known how close death had been. The network, I said. How big is it? Bigger than we thought. Operations in 12 states. Connections to organized crime in Mexico. We've identified at least 47 potential targets currently being surveilled. 47 women. Most of them have no idea they're being watched. Their properties have been assessed. Their vulnerabilities cataloged. Their access points identified. Agent Harrison paused. Mrs. Hartwell, what you did here, the evidence you gathered, the trap you helped us set, it's going to take down an entire criminal enterprise. But not in time to help Dorothy Walsh, or Rebecca Stone, or the other 12. No, not in time for them. Harrison was quiet for a moment. But in time for the 47 others, in time for the next 12, the next 100. I thought about Dorothy Walsh, the elderly widow who'd lost her family home to Nathan's lies. I thought about Rebecca Stone, who'd lost her business and her marriage to the same predator. I thought about all the women whose names I'd seen in Nathan's files, women who'd trusted, women who'd believed, women who'd been systematically destroyed by people who saw them as nothing but assets to be acquired. What happens now? I asked. Now we start building cases. Nathan will cooperate. He's facing 30 years if he doesn't, and his testimony will help us identify the other closers, the handlers, the money launderers. And me? You'll need to testify. Multiple trials probably over the next year or 2. Harrison paused. We can offer protection if you're concerned about retaliation. I looked at my house, my sanctuary, my safe place that Nathan had tried to steal. I'm not hiding from them, Agent Harrison. If they want to find me, let them try. That's very brave. It's not brave. It's angry. I turned to face her. These people built an entire operation around the assumption that women like me are easy targets. Lonely, vulnerable, desperate for connection. I thought about the past week, the breakfast at 5 a.m., the concerned suggestions about my living situation, the patronizing explanations of documents I understood better than Nathan ever would. I want to help. Help how? The 47 women on their target list, The ones who don't know they're being watched. Someone needs to warn them. Our agents will handle that. Your agents are strangers in suits. Official. Threatening. I shook my head. These women need to hear from someone who understands. Someone who's been where they are. Someone who knows what it feels like to be treated like a target instead of a person. Agent Harrison studied me for a long moment. What exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing that you let me help. As a consultant, an advisor, whatever you want to call it. I met her eyes. I know how these predators think because I just spent a week letting one think he was fooling me. Use that. It could be dangerous. More dangerous than having a gun pointed at my head in my own living room. I almost smiled. Agent Harrison, I've been careful my whole life, playing it safe, following the rules. And all it got me was a predator in my home and my daughter used as a pawn. I looked out at the ocean one more time. 3 weeks later, I learned how wrong I was to think it was over. The FBI had Nathan in custody. They had Carlos. They had the hard drive and the documents, and enough evidence to put them away for decades. But the network was bigger than one man, and the people behind it were not happy about losing their California operation. I was in the kitchen making dinner when the security system alerted me to movement outside. Not on the street, not on the beach path, inside my perimeter, near the back door. The system I'd installed after my divorce, the system Nathan never knew about, showed me exactly what was happening. A figure in dark clothing, moving toward the house, carrying something that glinted in the moonlight. I had about 30 seconds to act. My hand was already on my phone, dialing 911 as I moved to the panic room I'd built in the back of my master closet. 911, what's your emergency? Someone is breaking into my home. They appear to be armed. My address is... The glass in my back door shattered. I was in the panic room by then, the reinforced door locked behind me. The security monitors showed me everything. Not just one intruder. 2. And one of them was Nathan Cole. He shouldn't have been here. He was supposed to be in federal custody awaiting trial. But there he was, standing in my living room with a gun in his hand and murder in his eyes. Grace, his voice echoed through the house. Grace, I know you're here. The security footage shows you came home 2 hours ago. He'd been watching. Even from custody, he'd been watching. The FBI thinks they have everything, but they don't. He was moving through the rooms now, searching. They don't have the backup files, the offshore accounts, the connections to the people who really run this operation. I watched him on the monitor, my heart pounding. Those people are very unhappy, Grace. Very unhappy that you ruined their California operation. Very unhappy that you're planning to testify. He was getting closer to my bedroom. They offered me a deal. Take care of the Grace Hartwell problem and all my charges disappear. New identity, new life. All I have to do is make sure you never see the inside of a courtroom. The other intruder was checking windows, making sure I couldn't escape. I didn't want it to come to this. Nathan's voice was right outside my bedroom door now. I actually liked you, Grace. You reminded me of my grandmother. Strong, independent, stubborn. He kicked open the bedroom door. But business is business. I watched him search the room. The closet door was hidden behind a full-length mirror, one of the renovations I'd done after the divorce when I couldn't sleep without knowing I had somewhere safe to hide. He didn't find it, but he didn't leave either. I know you're here somewhere, Grace. The house isn't that big. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. Nathan heard them too. Doesn't matter. By the time they get here, I'll be gone. And you'll be a tragic victim of a home invasion gone wrong. He was examining the walls now, looking for hidden doors, hidden panels. My finger hovered over the button that would trigger the final security measure, the one I'd hoped I'd never have to use. The electromagnetic lock release. When triggered, it would unlock the panic room door from the inside, but it would also kill all power in the house for 30 seconds. Lights, security cameras, everything. 30 seconds of darkness. 30 seconds to get out of the house before Nathan found me. Or 30 seconds for Nathan to find me in the dark. The sirens were closer now, maybe 2 minutes out. Nathan was at the mirror, studying it, his hand reaching for the edge. I made my decision. I hit the button. The lights went out. I burst through the panic room door, shoving the mirror into Nathan's face with every ounce of strength I had. He went down with a crash. I ran, through the bedroom, down the hallway, toward the front door. Behind me, Nathan was screaming. Find her, she's running. The second intruder appeared from nowhere, blocking my path, raising his weapon. I didn't stop. 25 years ago, I'd taken a self-defense course after a client threatened my life. I'd kept up with it ever since. Not out of fear, out of principle. I hit the intruder low and hard, my shoulder connecting with his midsection. He went backward off balance, and I was past him before he could recover. The front door was 10 feet away. 5 feet. I crashed through it just as the first police car screeched into my driveway. On the ground, hands where I can see them. Officers swarmed past me into the house. I collapsed on my lawn, gasping for breath, staring up at the stars. Inside, I could hear shouting, scuffling. Nathan's voice raised in fury. Then silence. Mrs. Hartwell, an officer was kneeling beside me. Are you hurt? No, I'm fine. I started to laugh. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of it all. The terror and the relief and the sheer ridiculousness of a 52-year-old former lawyer tackling an armed intruder in her hallway. I'm fine, I said again. I'm absolutely fine. The officers brought Nathan out in handcuffs 5 minutes later. His face was bleeding from where I'd hit him with the mirror. His expensive clothes were torn. His charming smile was nowhere to be seen. He looked at me as they put him in the car. This isn't over, he said. I walked toward him, ignoring the officers who tried to hold me back. Yes, it is, Nathan. It's over. You're going to prison. Your network is destroyed. And every woman you ever targeted is going to know exactly who you are and what you did. I leaned closer. You thought I was easy. You thought I was weak. You thought I was just another lonely woman desperate for family connection. I smiled. You were wrong about everything. The car door closed. The sirens faded into the night. And I stood in my driveway, surrounded by police officers and flashing lights, and felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. The next morning, Agent Harrison arrived with coffee and news. Nathan's escape was an inside job. Someone in the federal marshal's office was on the network's payroll. She handed me a cup. We've arrested him. The whole operation is unraveling. I took the coffee gratefully. How many people did they have? At least 12 that we know of. Lawyers, accountants, low-level federal employees, anyone they needed to make their schemes work. She sat across from me. But it's over now. Really over. The Mexican handlers have gone dark. The offshore accounts are frozen. Without Nathan's testimony, they have no way to rebuild. And the women on the target list. We've contacted all 47. Most were shocked. Some didn't believe us at first. A few had already noticed warning signs. Harrison paused. We told them about you, about what you did, how you helped us take down the entire network. I didn't do it for recognition. I know. But they deserve to know who saved them. She pulled out a folder, which brings me to why I'm here. Inside the folder was a formal offer letter. Civilian consultant to the FBI Financial Crimes Task Force, part-time, flexible schedule, mostly working with victims to help them understand what happened and how to protect themselves going forward. I read through the document slowly. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a purpose. Harrison met my eyes. You were right, Grace. These women need to hear from someone who understands, someone who's been where they are. Your story, your fight could help hundreds of people. I thought about the past month, the fear and the anger and the determination that had carried me through. I thought about Dorothy Walsh and Rebecca Stone and all the women whose names I'd never know. I thought about Megan, who was slowly putting her life back together in a therapist's office 3 times a week. And I thought about Nathan, who had looked at me and seen nothing but an easy target. I'll do it, I said. Harrison smiled. I thought you might. We spent the rest of the morning going over details. Training requirements, background clearances, the cases I might be asked to help with. After she left, I sat on my deck and watched the ocean. The same view I'd had for 5 years. The same waves I'd watched while trying to heal from my divorce. But everything was different now. I wasn't the woman who'd retreated here to hide from the world. I wasn't the lonely divorcee that Nathan had seen in his profile. I was something else entirely. Something forged in fire and deception and the absolute refusal to be anyone's victim. My phone buzzed. A text from Megan. Coming over for dinner tonight, I want to try cooking for you for a change. I smiled and typed back, I'd like that. Then I put down my phone and looked at the sunset one more time, Tomorrow I would start my new life. Tomorrow I would begin helping other women escape the traps that had almost caught me. Tomorrow I would become the predator instead of the prey. But tonight I was just a mother having dinner with her daughter, and that was enough. 6 months after Nathan Cole tried to kill me in my own home, I sat in a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, watching a woman fall in love with a lie. Her name was Caroline Peterson, 61 years old, widow, owner of a charming bed and breakfast that had been in her family for 3 generations, and she had no idea that the handsome man sitting across from her was about to steal everything she had. His name was Marcus Webb. According to FBI intelligence, he'd been Nathan's partner for 7 years. When Nathan went to prison, Marcus took over the California operation. Now he was working the Pacific Northwest, and Caroline Peterson was his latest target. I watched them from 3 tables away, pretending to read a romance novel while my earpiece fed me updates from Agent Harrison. "Grace, we need you to make contact in the next 5 minutes. Caroline is about to sign preliminary documents." I closed my book and stood up. Time to go to work. Let me back up a little. After Nathan's conviction, 18 years federal, no possibility of parole, I'd spent 3 months in FBI training. Not to become an agent. To become something more valuable. A survivor who could reach other survivors. Agent Harrison had been right. The women targeted by these predators didn't trust people in suits with badges. They'd already been fooled by charming professionals. Another official face was just another potential threat. But someone who'd been where they were. Someone who understood the shame and confusion and desperate need to believe they hadn't been stupid. That person could get through. My first assignment had been Dorothy Walsh. I'd driven to Riverside on a Tuesday morning, finding her in a small apartment that was a far cry from the family home she'd lost. The home where she'd raised her children. The home where her husband had died in her arms. Nathan had taken all of it. "Mrs. Walsh, my name is Grace Hartwell. I was almost one of Nathan Cole's victims, too." She'd looked at me with eyes that had seen too much betrayal to trust easily. "What do you want?" "I want to help you get justice, and I want to make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else." It took 3 cups of tea and 2 hours of conversation before Dorothy Walsh started talking. Really talking. About how Nathan had found her at a grief support group. About how he'd seemed to understand her loneliness in a way no one else did. About how he'd slowly, carefully, methodically convinced her that she needed help managing her overwhelming property. "I signed everything he put in front of me," she said, her voice thick with old shame. He explained it all so nicely, made it sound like he was doing me a favor. He was a professional, Dorothy. He'd done this dozens of times. You weren't stupid. You were targeted. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Do you really believe that?" "I know it, because he did the same thing to me." Dorothy Walsh became my first success story. With my help, she agreed to testify at Nathan's trial. Her testimony, combined with Rebecca Stone's and mine, and 7 other women who finally found the courage to speak, put Nathan away for nearly 2 decades. But more importantly, Dorothy started healing. The last time I saw her, she was volunteering at the same grief support group where Nathan had found her, warning other widows, watching for predators, turning her pain into protection. That's what I wanted for all of them. The FBI training was unlike anything I'd experienced. 3 months of intensive coursework on fraud psychology, victim communication, and predator identification. I learned to read body language, to recognize the subtle signs of manipulation, to understand exactly how these criminals selected and groomed their targets. Agent Sullivan became my mentor. "The key thing to understand," she told me during one of our sessions, "is that these predators don't see their victims as people. They see assets, opportunities, problems to be solved." Nathan called me a target in his files, not even a name, just Target Hartwell. Exactly. Dehumanization is essential to what they do. If they thought of you as a person, a mother, a professional, someone with hopes and fears and a lifetime of experiences, they couldn't do what they do. So how do we stop them? By doing the opposite. By treating every victim as a complete human being. By listening to their stories. By helping them understand that what happened wasn't their fault. She paused. And by catching the bastards before they can hurt anyone else. I learned surveillance techniques, communication protocols, how to work with local law enforcement without stepping on jurisdictional toes. Most importantly, I learned how to approach potential victims without scaring them away. You can't lead with "your boyfriend is a criminal," Agent Harrison explained. They won't believe you. They'll defend him. They'll think you're jealous or crazy or trying to cause problems. So what do I say? You tell your story. You let them see themselves in it. You plant seeds of doubt and let those seeds grow on their own. It was subtle work, patient work, the opposite of everything Nathan had done to me, but it was effective. In my first 6 months as a consultant, I helped the FBI prevent 11 frauds and identify 8 previously unknown predators operating across the western United States. 11 women who kept their homes, 11 families who weren't destroyed, 11 Dorothys who never had to experience what the original Dorothy went through. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Which brings me back to that coffee shop in Portland. Caroline Peterson and Marcus Webb. I walked toward their table with my book in hand, wearing the slightly confused expression of a woman who wasn't quite sure where she'd seen someone before. "Excuse me," I said, stopping beside Caroline. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but aren't you Caroline Peterson?" "From the Bed and Breakfast Association conference in Seattle." Caroline looked up, puzzled. "I don't think we've— Oh, I must be mistaken. You just look so much like a woman I met there." I smiled apologetically. She was telling me about a similar situation, actually. A lovely man who wanted to help her manage her property. Very charming, very professional. Marcus had gone very still. "Do you know what happened?" I continued, speaking directly to Caroline now. "She signed some papers she didn't fully understand, and 6 months later she lost everything. Her home, her business, her savings." I shook my head sadly. "The man turned out to be part of a criminal network. They specifically target widows and divorcees with valuable property. Can you imagine?" Caroline's face had changed. The warm, trusting expression she'd been wearing while looking at Marcus was flickering now, uncertainty creeping in. "I'm sorry," she said slowly. "What did you say your name was?" "Grace. Grace Hartwell." I pulled a card from my purse, not FBI, just my name and phone number. "If you ever want to talk about anything, sometimes it helps to have someone who understands." I walked away without looking at Marcus. Behind me, I heard Caroline's voice. "Marcus, what was that about?" And Marcus scrambling, "I have no idea. Some crazy woman, probably trying to sell you something." But the seed was planted. 2 days later, Caroline Peterson called me. "Mrs. Hartwell, I looked you up. I read about what happened to you, about Nathan Cole." "Yes." "Marcus, the man I was with. He gave me papers to sign yesterday. For property optimization. The same words you used in your interviews." "What did you do?" A pause. "I told him I needed to think about it. He got angry, just for a second. Then he smiled and said, 'Of course, take all the time you need.'" "That's when you knew." "That's when I started to know." Her voice cracked. "Mrs. Hartwell, I was going to marry him. He proposed last month. I said yes." I closed my eyes, remembering Megan's face when she'd learned the truth about Nathan. "I'm so sorry, Caroline, but you called me. You trusted your instincts. That takes courage." "What do I do now?" "Now you let me help you." The FBI arrested Marcus Webb 3 weeks later, along with 2 associates who'd been helping him run the Portland operation. Caroline Peterson testified at his trial. She never got back the 6 months she'd lost to his deception, but she kept her bed and breakfast, her independence, her dignity, and she started warning other women in her community about the signs of romance fraud. Another Dorothy, another survivor becoming a protector. While I was learning to hunt predators, my daughter was learning to heal. Megan's therapy was brutal. 3 times a week, she sat in a room with a specialist in trauma and manipulation, unpacking everything Nathan had done to her. "The hardest part," she told me one evening, "is accepting that none of it was real. Every memory I have of our relationship is a lie. Every moment I thought we were connecting, he was just running a script." We were sitting on my deck watching the sunset, something we'd started doing every Sunday since Nathan's arrest. "How do you move past that?" I asked. "Dr. Martinez says I have to grieve the relationship I thought I had, like it was a death." She laughed bitterly. "Except the person who died never existed in the first place." "That sounds impossible. It feels impossible." She was quiet for a moment. "But I'm doing it anyway, because the alternative is letting Nathan win." I reached over and took her hand. I'm proud of you, Megan. For what? For being stupid enough to fall for a con artist. For being strong enough to face what happened. For getting help. For not letting this destroy you. She squeezed my hand. I had a good example. A month later, Megan told me she'd made a decision. I want to help other people who've been through what I went through. Not as an FBI consultant like you, but differently. How? Rebecca Stone and I have been talking. She's starting a podcast about romance fraud, survivor stories, warning signs, resources for people who think they might be in a bad situation. And you want to be part of that? I want to co-host it. Megan's eyes were bright with purpose. Mom, there are thousands of people being manipulated right now who have no idea. If they heard from someone like me, someone educated, someone who thought she was too smart to be fooled, maybe they'd recognize the signs before it was too late. I looked at my daughter, the same woman who'd arrived at my house a year ago demanding breakfast at 5 a.m. and treating me like staff. The same woman who'd been so desperate for love that she'd married a stranger. The same woman who'd been used as a tool to steal from her own mother. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who wanted to use her pain to protect others. I think that's a wonderful idea, I said. Really? Really, I smiled. You're going to help a lot of people, Megan. She launched the podcast 2 months later. Red Flag Radio Surviving Romance Fraud. Within 6 months, it had 500,000 subscribers. Within a year, it was one of the top true crime podcasts in the country. Megan interviewed survivors, psychologists, law enforcement officers, and reformed con artists. She broke down manipulation tactics in plain language. She created resources for people trying to escape controlling relationships. And every episode she told a piece of her own story. I was the access point, she'd say, the key that unlocked my mother's door. And I had no idea until it was almost too late. The emails poured in from listeners who'd recognized their own situations in her words. Women who'd left controlling boyfriends. Men who'd ended relationships with manipulative partners. Elderly people who'd refused to sign suspicious documents. Megan saved people she'd never meet from predators she'd never know existed. And she did it by telling the truth about the worst thing that had ever happened to her. That's my daughter. That's who she became. Nathan Cole's trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified on day 4. The prosecutor walked me through everything. The arrival, the demands, the documents, the investigation, the trap and the counter-trap and the gun in my living room. Nathan sat at the defense table watching me with those cold eyes. No charming smile now, no pretense of caring, just hatred, pure and simple. Mrs. Hartwell, his defense attorney said during cross-examination, isn't it true that you manipulated my client, that you pretended to be vulnerable in order to entrap him? I pretended to be what he expected me to be, I replied calmly. A lonely, confused, easily manipulated woman. If that's manipulation, then I'm guilty. So you admit to deceiving him. I admit to letting him deceive himself. I looked directly at Nathan. Your client saw what he wanted to see. A target, an asset, an easy score. He never bothered to look deeper. That's not Beau. He had a file on me, psychological profile, vulnerability assessment. He spent months researching how to steal my home. All I did was let him think he was succeeding. The defense attorney tried several more angles. None of them worked. When I stepped down from the witness stand, I walked past Nathan's table. He leaned toward me, his voice barely a whisper. This isn't over. I didn't break stride. Yes, it is, Nathan. You just don't know it yet. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. 18 years federal prison. No possibility of parole. When the verdict was read, Nathan showed no emotion. No anger. No despair. Nothing. But as they led him away, he turned to look at me one last time, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. He finally understood. He wasn't the predator anymore. He was the prey. The day after the verdict, I returned to Malibu. My house was quiet, peaceful, exactly as I'd left it. I stood on my deck and watched the waves the same way I'd done 1,000 times before. But everything was different now. A year ago, I'd been a woman hiding from the world, licking my wounds from a divorce, trying to convince myself that solitude was the same as peace. Now I was something else, a consultant who'd helped prevent dozens of frauds, A witness whose testimony had put a predator away for nearly 2 decades. A mother whose relationship with her daughter had been reforged in fire. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mrs. Hartwell, I found your number through the FBI Victim Resources page. I think my mother is being scammed, but she won't listen to me. Can you help? I typed back. Tell me everything. 3 hours later, I was on a plane to Phoenix. Another case. Another predator. Another woman who needed someone to believe her. This was my life now. Not the quiet retirement I'd planned. Not the peaceful solitude I'd thought I wanted. Something better. Something that mattered. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. Heavy cream paper. Elegant calligraphy. A return address in San Francisco. You are cordially invited to celebrate the marriage of Megan Elizabeth Hartwell and David James Morrison. I held the invitation for a long time, reading and rereading those words. Megan was getting married. Again. But this time was different. David Morrison was nothing like Nathan Cole. He was a high school history teacher with a kind smile and absolutely no interest in real estate investment. He drove a 10-year-old Honda. He wore clothes from Target. He had never once suggested that anyone needed help optimizing their assets. He was, in short, completely ordinary. And he loved my daughter with a quiet, steady devotion that Nathan had never been capable of. I'd watched their relationship develop slowly over the past 18 months. First dates that were actually first dates, not calculated operations. Arguments that got resolved through communication, not manipulation. A proposal that happened at a picnic in Golden Gate Park with a ring that David had saved for 6 months to afford. He's not charming, Megan had told me when she first introduced him. He's not smooth or sophisticated or any of the things I used to think I wanted. What is he? Real, she'd smiled. He's real, Mom, and that's so much better. The wedding was beautiful, small, intimate, held in a garden venue that Megan had chosen because it reminded her of our backyard when she was growing up. I walked her down the aisle. When David saw her coming toward him, he started crying. Not from manipulation or performance or some calculated display of emotion. Just pure, honest love. I sat in the front row and watched my daughter marry a good man, and I thought about everything that had led to this moment. Nathan Cole rotting in federal prison. The Heartbreak Network dismantled and destroyed. Dorothy Walsh volunteering at grief support groups. Rebecca Stone co-hosting a podcast that had helped thousands. 47 women who never became victims because someone warned them in time. All of it connecting. All of it leading here. To a garden in San Francisco. To a bride in white. To a second chance. After the ceremony, Megan found me by the fountain. Mom. Yes, sweetheart. Thank you. For what? For everything. She took my hands. For not giving up on me when I brought Nathan into your life. For fighting back when anyone else would have been too scared. For showing me what strength really looks like. I pulled her into a hug. You found your own strength, Megan. I just helped you see it was there. Do you think... She pulled back her eyes, uncertain. Do you think I deserve this? After everything I did, after helping Nathan try to steal from you? I looked at my daughter. This woman who had been manipulated, who had been used, who had been broken and rebuilt herself from the pieces. Megan, you didn't help Nathan do anything. You were his victim just as much as I was. The only difference is that his weapon against you was love instead of paperwork. But I was so blind. You trusted someone who was trained to be trustworthy. You loved someone who was performing love. I cupped her face in my hands. That's not a character flaw. That's being human. She started to cry. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. Now go dance with your husband. You've earned this happiness. She laughed through her tears and went to find David. I watched them on the dance floor, swaying to some song I didn't recognize. My daughter was happy. Really, truly happy. Not the manufactured happiness Nathan had provided. Not the desperate happiness of someone looking for external validation. The real thing. That was worth everything. It's been 2 years since Nathan Cole invaded my home. 2 years since I went from victim to hunter. 2 years since everything changed. The FBI task force has grown. What started as a small operation has become a model for other states, other countries. We've trained over 200 consultant survivors who now help other survivors. The Heartbreak Network is gone, but others have taken its place. There will always be predators. People who see vulnerability as opportunity. people who use love as a weapon. But now there are more of us fighting back. Last month I got a letter from Dorothy Walsh. "Dear Grace," it said, "I wanted you to know that I've started dating again. His name is Robert. He's a retired accountant. Very boring. Very kind. Very real. I had him investigated before our third date. I hope that doesn't make me paranoid. I prefer to think of it as smart. Thank you for teaching me the difference. I keep that letter in my desk. I read it when I need to remember why I do this." Yesterday I got a call from Agent Harrison. "Grace, we have a new case. A network operating out of Texas. At least 20 potential victims that we know of. When do you need me?" "Tomorrow, if you can manage it." I looked out my window at the Pacific Ocean. The same view I'd had for 7 years now. The same waves I'd watched through divorce and deception and rebirth. "I'll be ready," I said. And I meant it. Tonight I'm sitting on my deck with a glass of wine watching the sunset. Megan called earlier. She and David are expecting their first child. A girl. They're going to name her Grace. "Are you sure?" I asked. "That's a lot to live up to." "Mom," Megan said, "that's exactly the point. So there will be a new Grace in the world soon. A Grace who will grow up knowing that her grandmother was not an easy target, that her mother survived manipulation and found real love, that women are not victims waiting to happen. We are survivors. We are fighters. We are the ones who fight back." I don't know what tomorrow will bring. Another case, probably. Another predator. Another woman who needs someone to believe her. That's fine. That's more than fine. Because this is who I am now, not the corporate lawyer I used to be, not the wounded divorcee I became. Something new, something stronger, something that matters. Nathan Cole thought I was an easy target. He was wrong. And every predator who comes after him will learn the same lesson. Never underestimate a woman who's learned to fight back. Thank you for following Grace's story to the end. What would you do if someone targeted you or someone you love? Have you ever had to find strength you didn't know you had? Comment below and share your story. I read every single one. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. You never know who's being manipulated right now thinking they're alone, thinking no one would believe them. They need to know it's not their fault. Help is available, and fighting back is always possible. Check out 2 other channel favorites in the description below. Until next time, remember you are stronger than you think, braver than you feel, and never ever alone.